Hey everybody, my name is Tommy. Should have said that 10 minutes ago. I'm going to be talking about Svelte, and just for show of hands, who here has heard of Svelte? Okay, how many have spent more than like 3 minutes writing code with it? Okay, that's perfect. Okay, good. That's exactly what I wanted. So, what is Svelte? So you probably saw it in Twitter feed alongside other things like React and Vue. And this is how Svelte describes itself on its own website. And really the biggest takeaways here is that it's very similar to React or Vue. You're going to have like .js, in the same way that React has .jsx and Vue has .vue files, you're going to have .svelte files, right? But the biggest takeaway and the kind of paradigm shifting thinking that Svelte applied to itself is it's a compiler. So when you write your Svelte code and you hit save, it compiles it, and it only takes the necessary code needed to render your component or build your little app, and it ships that. So with React, when you build a React app, right, you have like window.react on the window. With Svelte, there's no window.svelte. There's none of that. It's just the code that you need, which means if you had a component, let's say you have a create React app, and you're just like console.logging one thing, you just have one thing you're outputting. You hit save and you build that, you're going to end up with a bigger file than if you would with Svelte. If you just have console.log in the Svelte file, the only thing that gets output is console.log. So it's pretty cool. So it's a compiler. So the fact that it is a compiler is pretty neat. And what it looks like in practice is this. It's a dev dependency. That's all it is. And React is a normal dependency. So for a typical, like the typical to-do app that every obligatory framework and library has to send out, for React, it's something like 50 kilobytes. And for Svelte, it's like less than 3 because you're not shipping a whole library with it. It's really cool. It's just the code that you need. So what benefits do you get from the fact that it's a compiler? Well, you obviously get a much, much smaller bundle size. This is more performant. This is just faster and better. You can, because it's a compiler, you can compile it technically to anything. So they're building like a Svelte to OpenGL, to WebGL, and they have a Svelte native and all these other things. So it's cool. You can be like, oh, this is compiled. Let's just compile it to something else. And that's going to be just much faster. Like the builds are instantaneous, even for somewhat large app, which is cool. So why was it created? So to figure out why it was created, we got to step back into the person who actually created it. So this is Rich Harris. He gets he's a liking to Erlich Bachman from Silicon Valley. But so he works at the New York Times. He's a design engineer, and he's building these really cool visualizations to go along with all these long form New York Times stories, which are really cool. They just had one on like Notre Dame when it was burning, and like a day later, they had this awesome infographic about it all. So it was really cool, and they built that in Svelte. It was pretty compelling. But he was hitting roadblocks back in the day before he was building in Svelte. He was using React, and he needed to be able to build these visualizations quickly as the news came in. And these are some of the reasons why he wanted, some of the lofty goals he wanted to achieve with Svelte. So he wanted to develop faster, and for all those reasons you see on the left, and reactivity built in. So what is reactive? What is reactivity? What is reactive programming? A bunch of definitions. I made one that was much longer, made it super concise, and it's a specific. It's a specific dynamic behavior of a variable at the time of declaration. So what does that look like in practice? Let's go see it. And the last thing you want to achieve was no virtual DOM. Well, what's wrong with the virtual DOM? I thought the virtual DOM was super fast. We all watched this presentation when React was coming out, Rethinking Best Practices. They talked about how virtual DOM is super performant and this is all great. But it turns out it's not that fast. The measure you have to kind of hold it to is, well, is it fast enough? And I'm working on a very big, complicated React app, and we are hitting like bottlenecks with React. I mean, we are constantly trying to perform things, make things more performant on the front end. So we're even starting to hitting these weird like rendering bottlenecks because you end up just really trying to rerun a components a lot of the times. It gets messy. So he wanted to get rid of the virtual DOM because it's faster to just write something directly to the DOM. So you're probably wondering what it looks like. So to have something to compare it to, we're all pretty much familiar with React. Let's look at React. So this is a simple React component. It has a handle click and a handle input on it, and when you go down to the like line 21 and you change input, it calls handle input, it sets the state, blah, blah, blah. So this is pretty cool, and this is, we're all familiar with this. But it's not that fast, especially when you have a huge tree of components. So when you're rendering this thing, what is it actually doing? Behind the scenes, Virtual DOM is saying, all right, here's my component, and you can only return one. That's why you have that React fragment thing, which is weird. And you're saying, all right, do I still have an element here? Good. Is it a div? Cool. What attributes do I have on it? Class name. Has anything changed? No. Okay, move on to the next thing. Next element. All right. Has it changed from an H1 to an H2 or anything else? No, it's still the same. Any attributes have changed? No. Has the content changed? No. All we did was click on the button in this situation, right? So move on to the next thing. Has the value of this changed? Yes, it has. Okay, well, we have to go through each one of these things and make sure this value gets updated. Goes on the button. Is it still a button? Great. Does it have any other callbacks on it? No. Does it? Any attributes change? No. And it keeps doing this over and over and over all the time. So this isn't that bad, and you don't notice it probably because you're on a nicer MacBook, and it's just pretty fast enough. But the React team knows it actually isn't fast enough, which is why they gave us all these things to basically, these are like abstractions into the React code base to basically say, hey, what we're doing isn't that fast. You can probably make us faster. So the fact that they gave us this should have been like a red flag, like, oh yeah, this actually isn't as fast as it could be. What's going on? So these are all arguments kind of showcasing the fact that React, the team, they know this isn't that fast. We shouldn't be updating stuff this much. This is what the same component would look like in Svelte. So the neat thing about putting JavaScript into our HTML, is what we're doing here, instead of HTML to our JavaScript, is we can compile it to anything. So this, in this situation, because we're on the web, we're compiling it to HTML, CSS, JavaScript. You compile it to native if you want. So this is really cool. And you can see there's no like set name, there's no like set count. It's just, it kind of makes sense. So this is what reactive programming is. So I declare this variable to be 0. If I change it behind the scenes, Svelte just knows, and it basically says, hey, if changed name, then we know we have to change this markup. So that's what it's doing behind the scenes. When you compile this, that's the only code that gets shipped with it. So it's super, super fast. So it's reactive by default. This is an example of that, like we just saw. You can have reactive declarations. So this is when this $sign colon is actually valid JavaScript. I forget what the name of it's called, but nobody ever uses it. Your linter complains at you and says this is valid. It actually is. It's just like hidden from like 1990. So this is a situation where every time we click and we increase the count, doubled and quadrupled, because count is getting changed, and this situation doubled is getting changed. It just knows, all right, let's re-render these things have changed. So this is similar to like if you have a first name and a last name and you save it to a full name, but you don't have to keep resaving full name. It's just like this will just work. If that makes sense. This is the other cool thing. You can have reactive statements. So this if statement will only ever get called when count is greater than or equal to 10. So it gets super fun because you can throw a console.log and say, instead of this if statement, you have console.log count. Every time count changes, it's going to console.log it. So you don't have to like throw your console.log inside this handle click callback. Just put it anywhere. It just knows, oh, listen for changes on this variable. Every time it changes, console.log it. The last thing I'll talk about really quick is performance. This is an example of Tokopedia. There's a Medium article on it, and they basically decreased the size of their landing page from React. They switched from React to Tokopedia from 320 kilobytes to 37 because you didn't need a lot. You don't need all of React. You get it no matter what. You can't tree shake out of it because React doesn't know what you might end up using later. So it's just one of the flaws of the system. And what's kind of cool in this situation, what they said they do because they didn't want to change all of their code to be React, just the landing pages. They prefetch React in the background after this page is done. So does that make sense? So like once this page is done loading, then we're gonna just on all the other subsequent page loads, we're just gonna use our actual real React code. But this is super fast and super fun first time around. And this is how they said this is how we got like A+ ratings and above 90 on Google Page and speed insights. So it's pretty cool. I know we only have 10 minutes, but I have like the REPL open so we can kind of play with this because it is pretty fun. Just want to give you guys some takeaways. Svelte is a framework. It's not a library. It has some opinions, but they're all good so far. So the like Svelte, it comes shipped with like a motion or like not physics, like transitions and animations, and you can just like tap into them. Like if I was building a React app, there's like 50 to choose from. I don't really know. It's kind of nice just to put some blinders on and just be like, oh yeah, the framework has this. I can just use it. So thinking of it as a framework is kind of helps a lot. It's a compiler, so it's super small bundles. It's reactive. You end up writing less code. You don't have to do all these handle callbacks, handle inputs. All that stuff is cool. There's no virtual DOM. And in this talk that I'm going to reference down here, Rethink Reactivity, he goes through why it's slow. And his talk, I organized like lightning talks at the company Matt and Tyson's Corner, and there's like, like 20 of us in a room, and we watched this talk, and we all clapped at the end of it. It's like the geekiest thing that we did, because he wasn't there. But so it was just like, but everybody felt compelled to like clap. I was like, what did we just watch? So I'm clearly selling it, but there's other cool stuff like they're helpful helpers. So like when you write something that's not accessible, like simple things like an image tag without alt, it'll complain. Where's some other ones? There's other like Angular-ish looking things. Like you saw that like on:click, then that click handler. I'm like, no, Angular's no good. It's like, no, this is actually fine. So it does like that two-way data binding in a really nice way. It's less verbose, so you end up writing less code. More code equals more bugs, so you have fewer bugs. So maybe you won't have a job because you won't have bugs to clean up, but at least you'll be happy. But the last thing I wanted to, this is just a screenshot of the talk, so I really recommend watching it after this. It just came out like April, and it was really good. But it's more fun, I think, to see some live code. So really quick, 808. So this is a situation where, like world, like this is great, and this changes, and clicking on this, and everything just works. I think we can do. Hold on. So if we rechange name to value, I'm just like gonna butcher this probably. This is a bad idea. Live coding. Name is not declared. You're right. It's not declared. I forget what I was aiming to do here. Let's undo everything. Oh, this is what I was trying to demo. You get server-side rendering by default. His argument for this, which is kind of cool, when you have server-side rendering with your React app, it renders the whole tree, it serializes it, and then it renders it to a string, and then it spits it out. And that's actually really expensive. And it's so if you have like AWS Lambda or whatever, those functions, it ends up adding up. With this, you're literally just getting the code that you need, and it just spits it out like a string. So that's all you need. So his big argument when he's going to talk is like, hey, this is going to save you guys money on your AWS bills. And I thought that was pretty compelling. But there's one other thing I want to talk about, but I'm not going to remember. But the other big takeaway is like go to the site, svelte.dev, and walk through the tutorial. It's very, very fun. And then you can just start playing around with the REPL. And yeah, it's pretty cool stuff. So that is it. My manager told me to say that we're hiring. So no, I'm just kidding. No, but we are hiring JavaScript engineers, and we just hired a PHP company product, so we need to convert all that PHP to it's like Laravel. It's pretty cool. It's JavaScript. So that's what I'm going to be working on. So yeah. Any questions?
Have you guys built any of your projects yet?
Not yet. We watched a video like a month and a half ago, but we're trying to get buy-in because Medallia is basically a feedback survey company. One of our biggest things that we send to customers are surveys. It's a decent size React app. It doesn't need to be. It's just surveys and questions. So we were looking at this as like, this is the perfect use case for, because it's just the JavaScript that you need on the page. It kind of makes sense. And I really like the Tokopedia example on that. They were like, just the landing page is going to be Svelte, and let's just prefetch our application JavaScript for everything else, and then everything's fine. So,
with some things like reactivity, obviously it needs a compiler. Is there kind of a place where this falls kind of apart as you get into larger, kind of more stateful scenarios?
So Svelte has like a state management app. So if you go to examples, store, writable stores. So like they thought through a lot of this stuff. How it looks on a big app is a little bit weird because if you, let me show you parent, child, props, probably here declare props. So this is weird, right? Here's the nested app. We're going to pass a prop of answer to it. To reference answer, you have to say export let answer. Everyone's like, why am I using export? It's because they wanted valid JavaScript. So this is always going to be valid JavaScript. But we were concerned when we were looking at this for like a big app. Like, are we going to just have a bunch of these things like stored everywhere? This is going to get gnarly. But long story short, I haven't seen a large app, so I can't tell you. They do have a repo, which is called Real World App. It's basically a blogging engine that anybody can sign up and write blogs for and add tags to. And just going through that code is pretty fun. And it seems okay.
So on its own, have any solutions or thoughts on routing specifically?
No, there's a Svelte router, I think, or it recommended one. I'm trying to remember. Yeah. No, we haven't. They have one that they reference in their repo, and in the Svelte app, the real world app, they have one. I'm just not sure. I forget what they're using.
But there's like a recommended thing.
Yeah, it makes sense. But yeah, it's just it was really surprising. I'm like working on a game right now. It's basically Connect 4, where you can rotate the board and then the pieces fall, which is fun. And we're using Svelte, and it's weird to get like that quick visual feedback on any code that you're writing. And it's really nice because the designers aren't super code. They don't like getting into the code, but they like studying the designs, and they can look at this and it looks just like normal HTML. So like it kind of looks like this, and they're able to be like, oh, I can kind of walk through this, and this is what the styles look like. Cool. This is what the board looks like. When you start doing loops, there's like a templating engine. We only have 10 minutes. So like this is what each statement looks like, and no, you're right, I'm not. It looked great. This is what it looks like. Oh my gosh, it rendered? That's crazy. Anyway, I had a bunch of animations in here, but they all went away. Yeah, they used Spring. But yeah, it's just really weird to get such fast visual feedback when you're building an app. It's really, really nice. Yeah. So yeah, definitely recommend going through the tutorial and check out the examples. And please watch that video tonight. It's like very, very good. Or it's horrible, and then you'll be surprised.
Before Svelte, were you a big React fan?
I still am. Like React's super cool. But now that I've seen this, and I'm at like an enterprise company, so like there's a lot of red tape and getting code to deploy. So seeing something like this, I can work on the side, is super fun. But like I'm probably speaking mostly Element 84 people will just acquire it. No. But yeah, I'm just kidding. Don't worry. But it's really cool to like everyone is super receptive to this stuff, and so they're like, yeah, like we should totally pursue that. Like, I just found out about this. Okay, so it's cool.
I'm not sure if there's a real answer to this, but you did mention you haven't really worked with seeing a lot of large applications with this. But do you know if most people kind of do like the landing page and then do the rest of the site with React, like you showed in the example? Or?
Yeah, I definitely think so, especially for landing pages, because a lot of traffic, you just like the code is mostly isolated, right? You don't need the whole React app there. I think that's right. The other really cool example was writing to the virtual DOM is actually working with React is actually really expensive on super unperformant devices. So a huge company in Argentina that has 250,000 devices that process credit cards. They were building their app in React, and the battery was draining like crazy, and it was super sluggish. So they ended up converting it to Svelte, and everything was fine. So on these super low-power devices, because you're not like just constantly doing all these calculations, if this changed, if this changed, if this changed, it's like, no, only look if these few things changed, and that's it. Ends up being super performant. So that was one of the things that came out. And the other big use case, I think, for Svelte is visualizations. I don't have a great example to show. This is not compelling, that whole thing. And even these examples on here aren't as good as the other ones I saw. But basically, like if you have a lot of stuff moving around on the page, using virtual DOM is not as performant as just using Svelte, which writes it to the DOM directly. And it's smart about and efficient about how it does it. So it's good for visualizations, landing pages, yeah, building games. Like I'm having a ton of fun with it.
Is anyone else waiting for Jonathan to have next talk about nonprofits?
Well, we were just talking about that because like with captive portals for like internet logins for waves, so that's how we like how I came across Svelte, right? So it's like so many of the things that you just talked about. It's like that's the biggest question I have is like we still increasingly need like React Native or need to be able to possibly use that. So like the Svelte native thing is like super interesting.
Right.
For me.
Yeah, and it's I wanna the native stuff has always been like, you know, has it ever been achieved like in an enjoyable way? Because like I know React Native, we still do it, and still every once in a while get back into it, but it's still a little bit slow and a lot of tooling and Xcode versions and all this other stuff. And just syncing across a bunch of different devs, it can be difficult. So we'll see how this turns out. I guess I don't know if anybody using it in production, they don't publicize it as much, but you can definitely play with it. It's super cool. Yeah. And the other thing he's working on, which is really cool, is the Webgl, because he's a big visual guy. So he's like, this is why he built it, basically. So he was giving some cool examples. There's an updated talk, Rethinking Reactivity, but it's in like August. And if you watch that one, he demos a little bit more. Otherwise, it's the same talk. I watched it 20 times. Yeah.